We might be done with our project, but we are far from finished because at this point, if your computer is anything like mine, it's a mess in terms of files and storage space that's being taken up. So let's take care of all that while also keeping everything safe in case we need to come back to our project later. So once we know that we're done with our project and we're not going to edit it anymore, that's when we can start moving footage off of the computer or off of the drive, wherever you're keeping your footage to edit on. That's where you can start moving it into what I like to call an archive folder. An archive might just be another external drive, or it could be something as robust as a full-on server setup. I will say that about a year ago, my wife and I did invest in a NAS server for our setup because we're both full-time online video makers, and that's a great thing to have. It's a 48 terabyte system that also backs everything up and is accessible just with anything that has an internet connection. So even if we're out of town and we need to get a specific piece of footage for something, it's easy to just log in and grab that footage. However, it's also really expensive and it's sort of confusing to set up, and it can also be kind of slow sometimes. I think our 48 terabyte system ended up costing about $1,800 total, and obviously those prices change all the time because technology and storage changes all the time, but that's not inexpensive, especially when you can just get like a 2 to 4 terabyte SSD for like $100 or $150 now. Depending on your workflow and if you're working with a team or if you're working by yourself or how much footage you're dealing with, how many projects you're working on, it might just be smarter to stick with external drives, which is something I did for a very long time until it started to drive me crazy because this is a lot of stuff to just sort of figure out. And older drives, some of these are from like 2007, older drives tend to fail, like physical spinning hard drives don't last forever. SSDs are a bit more reliable and much easier to travel with. So if you find yourself in this situation where you just have a stack of drives and you're dealing with all that, then it might be time to get a server. But if you just have 1 or 2 drives, or you're just a more organized person, you can probably get by with just, 1 or 2 drives. I do like these little Samsung SSDs. This is a T5 and this is a T7. This is the one that I'm editing this course off of. So all of the footage is going here and all of the course sections are being edited from this because there's so much footage I couldn't put it on my computer. And then this is just an archive drive. And this is usually the setup that I would recommend if you're going to deal with external drives, is to have at least 2 of them. One would be your project drive, your active footage. This is everything you're working on. For me, like I mentioned way back at the beginning, that's usually my computer because this computer has a 2 terabyte internal drive. So it's usually more than enough storage for everything that I'm working on, and then I move it onto something else. But for special projects, or when I had a computer that didn't have a drive that was as big, then I just use this for everything that I'm currently working on. And when I'm done with that, then it gets moved to an archive drive. And here's an example of that. So this is the archive on our server that we have set up, and I just have all of my videos in here. So I can go to any of these folders. If we go down to the bottom and we look at 330, I have moved the motion VFX tracking folder to the server from my desktop. And if I open that up, here's all of the footage here. Almost all of the footage, actually. If you notice, there are a couple things missing. If we look at file sizes, my talking headshots, I usually don't save those. The ones that were 25 gigabytes, and I think there was an 8 gigabyte. It was like 58 gigabytes of footage that was just the 2 camera angles plus the screen recording. Based on my experience, I don't think I'm ever going to need that footage again. And if every video I make has 50 to 70 gigabytes of just talking head footage, that ends up taking a lot of space on my storage. So I usually don't save that, and I just save all of the other footage and all the other shots. Because there are plenty of times where I need to do something where I decide, oh, I need a shot of my Sony a7 IV, and I can go into the Sony a7 IV review and then pull up some B-roll clips of that camera that I can then use in a new project that I'm working on. And that is hugely helpful to have, but I don't need the stuff of me just sitting here talking. I'm probably never going to use that again. So that's what I save, is all of that stuff. And then I have a separate folder that's for thumbnails and also another folder that's just for finished videos. A big question that people have is whether or not to save the actual Final Cut timeline. I cannot answer this question for you. I can just tell you that I don't save my timelines. Unless it's something that's ongoing where I'm waiting for someone to approve something or get some feedback on something, I won't save a timeline. As soon as a project is done and it's finished and I've closed the book on it, I just delete that timeline, that event within Final Cut Pro. You could move your timeline, your whole Final Cut library to a drive if you wanted to. That's entirely up to you. In my experience, I've never had to go back 6 months later and open up a timeline and try to edit something. The few times that I have had to go back and edit a project or change something, or I wanted to change something, I've just taken the finished video file and then put that into Final Cut as a new project and chopped it up and pasted it together, and it's been totally fine. I think saving all of my timelines would just drive me completely crazy because those project files get so big so quickly. And that is the other thing we want to talk about. Now that we've got all our footage archived, we need to talk about managing space within Final Cut Pro, because as you work on a project, Final Cut Pro libraries are kind of like goldfish. They will expand to take up as much space as they have. Now that I have moved everything, you're going to notice the project that we've been editing looks a little bit different. Everything is missing, basically. I could relink this or put the files back if I want to, but even though all of this media is missing, if I click on the library, it's taking up a lot of space. In this case, it's 194 gigabytes, and this is actually after I have already tried to clean up some of the stuff. It was over 500 gigabytes when I was finished editing the project yesterday. So now I'm never going to use this again, but it's taking up 200 gigabytes of storage space on my computer. So one thing that you can do to take care of that is go up to File, and then go down to Delete Generated Library Files. And from there, you can select Delete Render Files. I choose All, Optimize Media, and Proxy Media, and then I click OK. This does not delete the project. This just deletes all of the generated stuff that Final Cut has made throughout the project. Like every time it needs to render something, every time it applies an effect to something, or it copies a clip or whatever, it's all of that kind of stuff. You could still open this timeline and re-render everything out if you want to, but this just gets rid of all of that. My intro library is only 2 gigabytes now, so I've basically freed up almost 200 gigabytes of storage space on this computer just from doing that. And I haven't deleted the project file. The timeline is still there if I need it, but I know that I don't need this timeline. So normally what I would do at this point is usually create a new event. Like I know that the next one's going to be 331. I guess I deleted the one we created earlier in the course. And now I don't need this event anymore, so I'm just gonna put it to the trash, which feels so strange to spend so much time editing something and it looks so beautiful and it's so complex, and it's like, well, to the trash with you, goodbye. And now I have this library with a blank event that's ready for the next project. If you're finished with a library within Final Cut Pro, you can use your Finder and go to wherever that library is stored. Maybe it's on an external drive, maybe it's in a folder on your hard drive, and you can just delete that library. And then next time you open Final Cut Pro, it will create a new library from scratch that has nothing in it. That's a good thing to do if you've had a library that's been around for a while, and even when you do the process to delete the generated files, it's still taking up space on your computer. You might just need to get rid of that library and start fresh with a new one that's not going to be taking up any space. So those are the steps that I take to archive and manage my footage. Now that that project is finished, I basically want all traces of it off of this computer. I want to save the really important stuff so I can come back to it later, whether that's on an external drive or a server. I'm pointing over there because the server is on the other side of that wall. And now my computer is nice, empty, free and clear, and ready to start with a brand new project.